Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp with a Limp, and I'm here with a surprise special treat for you all. Something that I've actually talked about previously, but it was kind of my own copy. I created my own version, and now I've actually got the prototype version in, and that is PanzerKampf. This is by Trafalgar Editions, and I have talked to Mr. Jose there. Previously, I had contacted him when they ran the Kickstarter on this because I wanted to help out with it. I liked the look of it. I got a kick out of the Kickstarter, so I did one of those Kickstarters where checking out videos, talked to him, and I told him, I'm like, hey, if you got an extra prototype copy, I'm more than happy to review it, and he didn't. So I was like, okay, no problem. And I put together some of my own components, my own stuff to kind of get just a heads up of the game. But I didn't really like it because I didn't have as much of the rules to go by. I was kind of guessing on some of the stats. So I couldn't show it exactly as it was. But now I'm not guessing. I've got actual cards that show the real stats, or at least the stats where they are now, and some other pieces that go along with it. Plus the tanks, we've got ourselves a Tiger, 3 of the Panzer IVs, and a Stug. And for the Soviets, we have 3 of the T-34s, an Su-76, and a KV-1 as well. That is all part of this. Now, everything that you guys are seeing is prototype, but it is like the production prototype version. Obviously, the final production version will be better, but this is their stuff versus my stuff. Now, one of the things, if you had not seen it previously, that really kind of caught my attention about this is that this game is based on range bands. So it can kind of be as big or as small as you want it to be. Now, there is kind of a too small point. They do recommend at least a 1 meter board, so to speak. So play mat, whatever you're using to play on. And you would divide that into 20 centimeter sections. So 20 centimeter sections. I keep wanting to say inches. That's actually what these little pieces here are representing. So we have 5 bands all the way across. That's how range is conducted when it comes to this game. So when we start looking at our card pieces here, see D1, D2, D3, D, all the way up to D5. That has to do with the range bands, because obviously the farther that you're firing at an enemy tank, the less amount of penetration you're actually going to get from whatever it is that's doing the firing. This is actually the stats for the Tiger, and this thing is a beast. I mean, just a straight up beast. So when you're playing the game, you're not actually going to have a tape measure out once you've measured. So you'll measure and you'll divide it up into your 5 sections. It says to do it long ways. All right. So as you're kind of looking at your map, whatever the longest section is, that's how you're going to divide it out. Because let's say our enemy tanks are all here in the same band, you'd be using your D1. If they're adjacent, you're using D2, D3, D4. And right now, if they were to fire at each other, since they're on each opposite end of the spectrum, you'd be using the farthest range band. So the way the game's going to work is we're going to have an initiative phase where you roll off, and whoever wins the roll, whoever gets higher, they get initiative, which means the other player actually has to move first. So let's say the Germans won initiative, the Soviets would move all their tanks first, then the Germans would move their tanks. Now this is actually after the repair phase. So it goes initiative, repair phase, movement phase, turret phase. So after movement's done, that's when your tanks are going to adjust their turrets. And then fire phase. Fire phase is actually conducted simultaneously. Now you can do that according to initiative, but that's an optional rule. And I actually kind of like it better as simultaneous. So once all the tanks have moved for their turn, they're all in their places. Their turrets are all pointing wherever they're going to be pointing. Everyone is effectively firing at the same time. You might do one side and then do the other side, however you wish, but you're not going to have a tank that gets destroyed before it can fire. I like it that way, but you can play the game either way. If you do like initiative, kind of like games like X-Wing, where some pilots don't get the chance to fire because they get initiative taken out, you can do that in this game as well. Now there is a modifier for it, so it wouldn't happen to where one person would get initiative over and over and over again and keep screwing over the other. There is a modifier of -1 that is cumulative, so it keeps adding up over the course of the game. If one person keeps getting it, to eventually, no matter what, the other person is going to beat them in the roll. All right, so let's talk about the stats of the vehicles, because I know that's what you guys are concerned about. We'll talk about that, and then we'll run through some examples of gameplay, let you guys see how it's going to go. So let's get the basic one. Let's get a Panzer IV here, and here's our T-34, so we can look at these stats. Okay, so as you're looking at your card, it's going to list down the name, whatever point value. So you can see that our T-34 is actually worth more than our Panzer IV. It's got a little better of a gun, so it can do a little more damage, a little better penetration, so it actually costs more. Now, for my purposes here, I just left all the vehicles into it, but with the vehicles that I have in this prototype set, the Russians would actually have a 10-point advantage. Not a huge deal. I mean, the Germans do have that Tiger, and that thing's almost impossible to destroy. So, yeah. All right. Movement value is up here underneath your points. So this Panzer IV can move 2. And when it's saying a number value, it's referencing this token. So this is your movement token. So when this tank moves, it can move up to 2 of these, and you can adjust it up to a 45-degree angle without having to spend an extra movement point. If you turn beyond that, however, up to like 90 degrees, then you're going to be paying extra movement points. So if we're looking at our T-34 here, it has a movement value of 3. So we could place 3 of these in front of it and adjust it, and it is flattened on the back there, so you can tell easily what a 45-degree angle can be. Okay, so you could kind of move it around like so, and boom, put the tank at the end, and that would be its 3 movement value. Now it does come into play though, popping off our turrets, which are kind of cool because they do move around. Oh, and by the way, don't hold my crappy little paint job against me. I painted them very quickly so I could get them onto the board and show you guys. So this was just a quick 1-day down and dirty paint job. Hit it with a color, a little dry brushing, called it a day. But with your vehicles, if they do move up to their full movement value without a 90-degree turn in there, then they don't get to just stop on the next turn. They're going to have to go at least 1 forward so they don't stop on a dime. I like how that gets added in there. And it is easy to tell that apart because you are going to put tokens down to signify how far the unit has moved, all right? Because these actually affect your to-hit values of being shot at and shooting yourself. So you'll put whatever token down. Let's say instead of 3, it moved 2. If that was its full movement value, you'll use a yellow token to signify the fact that it's got to move at least 1 movement point forward ahead on the next turn. If it wasn't, however, then you can put down a white one that signifies that it can stop on its next turn or even go in reverse. All right, so that's movement points. This little red cross symbol here, this has to do with a tank's survival, and that's going to come into play if you are playing a campaign game. So the tank can be destroyed, but there's a chance the crew will survive. That's what that number is going to represent. So if you play a campaign type game and you want your crew to get experience and become better over battles, they might have their tank blown out from underneath them, but there's a chance they could survive. So you're rolling and you're looking for equal to or under that number on a D6. Underneath that, it's going to tell you what caliber weapon they're using, and then again, those range bands on the damage that they're going to do. So if we're looking at our Panzer IV here, there's 2 different types of shot that it can do. It has whatever's always on the top is standard. So it has pretty much unlimited shells of that. You can fire it as much as you want. The one underneath, this has heat ammo. That's your special ammunition. You're going to have to do a 2d6 roll. If you fail your 2d6 roll, so you're looking for 7 or under on a 2d6, then you're actually going to be out of that. So you might get lucky and be able to fire off a whole bunch of them. And then again, you might get unlucky. And after one shot, boom, you're out of your special ammunition. So these values have to do with the penetration at those different range bands. So if you're in the same range band, boom, it's 45 millimeters. That comes into play when you're looking at your target. So our Panzer IV here has the highest of 50 millimeters of armor, 30 on the side, 20 on the rear. The T-34 is a little better, a little sloped armor going on. So 52, 52, 45, and 45 on its armor, all right? And its gun's a little bit better, up to 80 mil there at range 1, or if it's firing the APCR, up to 102. Now underneath that, the to hit value modifiers come into play. Because generally speaking, you're rolling 2d6 most of the time when we're doing our attacks, and you're wanting to hit equal to or under. So lower numbers tend to be good in this game. So when we're looking at farther range bands, those plus modifiers are making it harder to hit. So we start having a positive modifier applied at D3 on both of these guys. For the Panzer IV, it's +1, +2, then +3. And then for our T-34, +1, +2, +2. So a little bit better. All right, and then again, when we're looking below, we've got, so our to hit values, our to damage values, and then modifiers that come into play when the own tank is hit. All right, so if our T-34 here is firing and it hits, then you're going to roll and look for possibly damaging the target. And for this, you're looking at this red symbol here. So the red enemy tank, and you want equal to or under that number. And again, some modifiers can come into play. So if our T-34 is firing and it hits the front of a tank, it looks for a 6 or under, side 7 or under, rear 8 or under. Really just that simple. Then underneath that, that's where the modifiers come into play when that tank's being hit. So let's say our T-34 here is firing at this Panzer IV. It's looking for these numbers, but then these modifiers would come into play. So if it's firing at the front of the tank, there's no modifier, but the side and rear are weaker, so it actually gets to apply a -2 modifier. That signifies the weaker armor that tank actually has. When we're looking at our T-34, again, better tank. So it's got +1, that sloped armor up there at the front, and just 0 and 0 on the sides. So, and it's not going to be taking extra chances of being penetrated, being damaged when it's being attacked, but the Panzer IV is. It doesn't have as quite a good of armor. It's a little thinner, not as sloped. So boom, negative modifiers, which it makes it easier to be penetrated, makes it easier for it to be damaged. And I know me talking this out, it's not making a whole lot of sense just yet, but it will. So we'll play out a few little examples of play so you guys can see that, how it works. But just understand when we're conducting our attacks, the lower numbers tend to be good. So positive modifiers for our armor is good. Positive modifiers for our range, though, are bad because you want low to hit, you want low to damage. And just so you guys can see, something like this Tiger here has just massive stats. Firing at its front, you're adding +4. That makes it brutally hard just to damage this Tiger. +2 for the sides and the rear. And when it's firing at an enemy tank, because it's got that big 88 on it, it's got a very easy chance on a 2d6 roll. Again, you got to add your modifiers to it to be able to penetrate because it's got such good numbers, such high penetration. And I know you're going now, okay, Gimpy, you've talked about to hit, you've talked about to damage, but you haven't really talked about what those penetration values come into play. Like, how are they getting involved? Now, they come into play when you don't penetrate, all right? So good example would be this base Panzer IV firing at this T-34. It's only got 45 max millimeters of penetration. It has to fire at the side or the rear of this T-34 to be able to destroy it. Well, let's say it's hitting it at the front, 52 millimeters of armor. it cannot penetrate that, okay? But if you have at least more than half the value, okay? Our T-34 has 52 millimeters of armor. Half of that value is 26. Let's say it's firing heat or at range 1, it's got 45 millimeters penetration. 45 does beat half that value, okay? The half is 50 or is 26, so it can cause a critical hit. And then you're going to roll on a chart, 1d6 to determine where you hit. All right, and forgive me because I do not have player age yet in the prototype copy, but here is our little critical hit table. And you're going to roll a 1d6. Now, this is coming into play if you did not beat the armor. So your penetration did not beat it. If you penetrate full out, you just destroy the tank. You're done. If you hit and then you hit the damage roll and your penetration is high enough to beat their armor, it's just destroyed. You don't have to worry about this. However, if you hit and you hit your damage roll, but your penetration is not enough to fully penetrate, but it's at least higher than half of the armor, then you're rolling here and you're going to see what gets damaged. And this will apply a token where it damages the gun or the turret or the hull, engines, tracks, or even stuns the crew. Now, the only time we're going to do anything different than this when those conditions are met is if we hit the barrel. So it talks about that in here. And again, you can, pause this and read this section of the rule book if you want to. But very quickly, if you do hit the barrel, you hit the gun, then you're effectively hitting the front and the mantlet at the same time. So you have to combine those two numbers. For our T-34 here, that would be up to 104. And again, half of that would be 52. So essentially, if you hit that gun, you have to almost double what you're looking for. So in this case, we would not be able to get a critical hit with our Panzer IV because those two armor values get added together when you hit something like that. That's the only time you have to worry about it. The rest of the time, you're just looking at the one number and seeing if you're at least greater than half that value. Okay, so I set us up a quick little example of play here. Let's say we've done our initiative phase, that the Germans moved first and they've moved up to these positions. We can see there's a 2 modifier here on our Panzer IV. So they moved their full maximum, so they do have to move at least one more. Our T-34 only moved 1, and our little Stug over here with my crappy ass camouflage paint job on these. Yeah, you guys are gonna have to forgive me for that paint job. I was trying for something on this one, and it just it didn't work out quite as I anticipated. I just did some quick lines, brown, green, and then that base tan color for like a desert camo. I mean, it came out all right, but it wasn't my best. But I did it quick, so we'll go with it. So our Stug moved 1, all right? So it's got the 1 modifier here on our T-34 and a 2 modifier here on our Panzer IV. Now, this section of the game, after movement's done, again, we got other tanks we'll bring into later, that's when the turret aspect comes in. Now, the thing is, for our Stug here, it doesn't have a turret, so we don't have to worry about moving it. But it does have a section of fire. All right, so there's a little thing here we can pull out. We know that the Stug's going to be able to fire at the side of our T-34 here. But our Panzer is going to have to turn, and our T-34 here has to make a choice. Now, there's a token you can use to help determine where you want to move it and if you can move it. So if you want to move your turret, you do have to roll a 1d6, and depending on how high you roll determines how far you can swing around that turret. If you get a 5 or 6, you can swing it all the way around, point it behind you. 3, 4 though, you can only point it up to 160 degrees. 1 to 2 up to 80 degrees. All right, so basically either front left or front right, or back left, back right, or all the way around essentially. For our Panzer IV over here, we know no matter what he rolls, he's going to be good because he simply needs to turn his turret a little bit this direction to fire at the T-34. So he's going to be all right. We'll roll for him anyway, though, and get him. Oh, he got a 4. He's good. So he could swing his all the way back around to the rear. He's not going to have a problem, but he's going to turn his to point over here at the T-34. T-34 has that choice to make, though. Does he want to fire at the Panzer IV, or does he want to fire at the Stug? So he's going to look and see what his better options are. His options are pretty much the same. It's 50 millimeters of armor at whichever target he fires at. Now, however, the hit modifiers are a little bit different depending on which one he goes for. It's either going to be a +1 for the Stug, or possibly a -2 if his shot's able to come in just outside of that frontal arc. So he probably stands a better chance of being able to hit this Panzer IV. So he will keep his turret pointed to the front and take his chances over on the Panzer. Okay, so let's say we are here, we're ready for our combat, we've got our modifiers set out, and it's simultaneous, so it doesn't really matter who we start with, but we'll start with our Stug. You can start in an initiative order if you would like. It makes it easier to do one side next, either way. Our Stug here is going to fire at our T-34. So our Stug, looking at the fact that we're one range band apart, all right, so we got the little range band marker here. They're not in the same range band, so it's not going to be D1. It's going to be D2. There's not a modifier to hit applied for the range band, but we do have to worry about the fact that they're moving, all right? So the Stug moved 1 and the T-34 moved 1. Because of that, that's going to be a +2 added to this shot. And I don't think I've showed you guys this yet, but this little piece tells us, depending on what type of terrain they're in, what our to hit values are going to be. So clear terrain, 9 or under. Woods, 7 or under. Hull down, and you can use whatever type of terrain you want to represent that. I think Flames of War terrain works really well with this game. Company of Heroes terrain works really well. The scales are close enough that you can use pretty much any of that type stuff you want. So remember, the faster your tanks are going, the more those modifiers are going to stack up and make it harder to hit. Now, on top of all of that, looking at our range band and our penetration, if we fire just our regular ammo, right, at D2, there's only 38 mil of penetration. But looking at our T-34 side shot, which is where this is going to be coming in from, 45 mil of armor. He doesn't have enough to penetrate, so it would be a, let's see, what's half of that? Brain fart now. What is that? 22 and a half? Is penetrate? Yeah, he does beat the half, so he could get a critical hit, but we're going for the destruction. So our Stug is going to fire a heat round instead. Special ammo. Now we have to roll to see if he runs out of heat. He's firing it. When you do that, you roll your 2d6 and you're looking for 7 or under, right? Flat out, no modifiers, just to see if they run out of their special ammo. Let's see, does he? Yes, he does. He did not roll 7 or under on our thing, so we do mark him as special ammo out. Now, he's already fired this shot. You'll get at least 1. So if you fire it and you run out just like that, you'll put the marker down, but you still get to fire that shot that you ran out, right? So he's getting this one at 75 mil of penetration. Again, we're gonna look at this. He's in the open, he's clear. We gotta get 9 or under. Accounting for our 2+1s, we're looking for a 7 or under here. So let's roll our die and see what we get here. And I think that did it. Yep, you got a 6. Boom, perfect. Just like that, he has hit his target. Now his target isn't dead yet. He's hit him. This is good. Now we got to see if he damaged him. Remember, we're going to look on here and see our value. Firing at the side of a target, we need a 6 or under with our Stug. But our T-34 does have modifiers, yes, but not on the side, so it's just a 0 there. So since this is a 0, we don't have to change anything when we're doing this roll. We're simply looking for a 6 or under. And since he did use that heat round, if he penetrates, it is going to beat the armor, which means the T-34 is killed flat out. So let's roll our value, see what we get. Looking for 6 or under. Oh, we got the 6, and just like that, boom. Our T-34 has been taken out. He got ammo racked in the side. Boom, popped the turret off, and he is destroyed. Now, the thing of it is, though, is remember, this is simultaneous combat. Simultaneous. So, yes, he was taken out. So, essentially, our shot coming over here from our Panzer IV doesn't matter anymore since he was, boom, destroyed by the Stug. But he still gets to return fire. He does get his shot on the Panzer IV. So when we look at our modifiers here, Panzer IV is in range 2, right? We know there's not going to be a modifier for the range band, but we do have a +2 token for our Panzer's movement and still a +1 for our T-34's movement. That means a +3 onto that 9, okay? Since he's in the clear, so we're looking for a 6 or under before we're even talking about damage. 6 or under to hit, and then we check for our damage. So let's roll, see if we hit him. And boom, just like that, we didn't. But just for example purposes, let's tweak this around. And oh, look at that, he got a 5. Boom, he did hit him. For our example, let's say he hit him, okay? So he was able to beat the modifiers, get in there for the movement, and he did hit him. So our Panzer IV has a -2 when it comes to being shot in the side. That is a big deal because when we look at our T-34, when we're looking at our T-34's to hit value of 7, because he is aiming at the side. And again, to show you guys, I don't remember if I showed this yet, but you will check it by that marker there in the front to see where the shot's going. So if we go from the barrel of our T-34 towards our target, it is just outside, right? So we are hitting it. If his shot were coming in like so, then it would be towards the front. Anything outside of that is going to be the side. And obviously, if you got a shot coming in towards the rear, just put that token on the backside of the tank to determine whether or not it's going to hit in the weakest portion or not. So essentially, thanks to that, our T-34 gets to look to see if he is hitting with a 9 or under thanks to that weak modifier. And again, since he's destroyed, we could say he's firing his APCR, but it really doesn't matter because his penetration values are high enough to beat the side armor of our Panzer IV regardless, so he wouldn't be worrying about destroying either way. But let's roll and see if he did get him. Oh yeah, he got him. That 6 worried me for a sec, but thanks to that modifier, he does get him. Normally an 8 would miss, but this is where this modifier comes into play. So this is going to affect all your tanks, right? The tanks with weaker armor are going to have negative modifiers, making it easier to destroy them, and the tanks with better armor are going to have positive modifiers to make it harder to destroy them. Again, looking at our Tiger here, +2 being the minimum, even from the rear of this tank. This thing's going to be a beast to destroy, and its weakest armor is 82 millimeters. So you got to bring the big guns to take this guy out. And I haven't showed it yet, but the stats for the KV-1, little under, doesn't have any special ammo, but it does have fairly decent armor values, +2, +1, +1. Over there does pretty good at shooting at range as well, and decent penetration values, really not the best. Even at close range, it wouldn't be able to penetrate the Tiger from anywhere, although most people can't. The only thing that will do it is a T-34 firing from relatively close range with its APCR ammo. That's the only thing on the Russian side that will actually penetrate the Tiger at any side. So essentially, in that combat, the Stug was able to fire and destroy the T-34. The T-34, before it was destroyed, did fire and it destroyed the Panzer IV, and you could pull off the turret and use that to show that it was destroyed, put some black cotton balls or something like that. You know, something neat just to signify the fact that the tanks have been destroyed. Now, let's just say for example purposes that we've got something real basic like this Panzer IV shooting at the T-34 at the front. Can't penetrate the armor, okay? T-34's armor is too hard in the front for it to be penetrated, even, I'm holding up the wrong card, by even the heat ammo coming from the Panzer IV, okay? Let's say, for our purposes, he fires, he hits. What happens then? What happens with a critical hit? Because he does beat half the armor, okay? Again, that's when you're going to roll here and you're going to determine. So we'll roll a d6 and see where he hit. So roll our d6 and we got a 4. A 4 in this case is an engine. So for our purposes, we would take our engine damaged and we would place it right there, and it would remove one movement unit from the T-34. So those can be added up. You can keep getting extra engine damaged markers and eventually become immobilized. So in this case, this T-34 would go from a 3 movement value to a 2 movement value. You could have things like gun being damaged, so malfunctions, unable to shoot, turret malfunction, so it can't swing the turret around anymore, hull damage, where it actually provides a modifier in favor of the enemy damaging it, so it would make it to where it's easier to get that damage roll through, or tracks being hit where the vehicle is immobilized. Stun is also one of the results they can get, and that causes the crew to lose the next turn. And if they have a yellow modified marker, not this one, but this one on them, then they will continue forward even if the crew is stunned, and that can cause them to ram an enemy tank and even cause damage that way. All right, so to continue looking on a few other things that we haven't touched on just yet, like I had mentioned earlier about the terrain, there are some terrain pieces that come in with the box, like just the standard regular box. These are going to be like your token pieces though. You can use whatever you have, but these are perfectly acceptable. They are double-sided, so buildings, obviously can be rubbled, but they'll do things like blocking line of sight. Same with the trees. So again, I would have something like a laser pointer, ruler, something that you can trace your lines with, just to ensure whether or not you're crossing it. Now, do be careful though when you are messing around with trees. As you move your tanks through them, they do have a small chance to become immobilized. And if they do become immobilized, they're going to be stuck there for the rest of your game. Also, when it comes to some other optional rules, I left these on here so I can show them to you guys. There is a set of event tokens. So this is purely optional whether or not you want to have it into your game or not. But these will be drawn. Generally, you're going to draw them whenever you roll like doubles to hit. It can be your event trigger to draw them. And they'll do things like cause a Stuka or Sturmovik airstrike, cause emergency repairs or friendly fire. Impact and break a turret ring. This one's like the emergency repairs, rapid fire, ghost panzer, jams your turret. Lots of little things can pop up when you have these. But again, this is completely optional. You can have them in your game, not have them in your game, completely up to you. Now, I know I had mentioned earlier as well the repair tokens, because there is the repair phase. Tokens like these, the ones that will have a symbol on it, it says R1 or D6. What that stands for is you have to roll a D6 and you're looking for a 1 to repair it. 6 makes it permanent, and on a 2 to 5, it just remains as it is. So you have a 1 in 6 chance of fixing it, 1 in 6 chance of making it permanently bad, and then 2 to 5 chance of having it just stick around until the next turn. One thing though is if you have a tank that has multiple things wrong with it, you can only attempt to fix one. So you can't keep trying to fix every single thing wrong with it. Some things that get damaged are damaged permanently though, like engines or hull damage, or if you have your tracks are out, you're not able to repair those. But if you do use the event triggers, drawing one of these will allow you to repair something along those lines that you normally wouldn't be able to repair. And also, just to show you guys really quick, because we have touched on a lot of the Stug, the T-34, the Panzer IV, the regular vehicles are in it, but I did want to show you guys, at least let you see some of the cards. I've mentioned the Tiger a few different times now. This thing is straight beast. So I think the 50 point might honestly be a little shy. This thing is easily worth 2 T-34s, if not more. It's not very fast, only moves at a 2, but it's just got massive firepower, and the armor on this thing is beastly. It'll punch a hole in damn near anything. High penetration value, and then its armor value is just through the roof. Positives all the way across the board. Like I said, real high chance of hitting. So this thing is just a beast on the table. Closest thing that I've got right now for the Russians is the KV-1, and you can see it's close. It's not that close. 40 points on this one. It's also a heavy tank, but it's just a lighter version of the Tiger. Not as much gun power, doesn't hit as easy, still real good armor. That's going to be hard to punch into this guy to get a hit to go through. And it's still relatively high penetration values. I mean, the Panzer IV firing at this thing, yeah, well, no, yeah, it could get a critical hit. You know, the glancing blow doesn't actually penetrate on any of the spots on it because it's at least half, but it can't do the front and the mantle combined. But anywhere else, yeah, it would stand a chance of at least damaging it. That'd be about it, though. And then we got the Su-76, which decent gun. It's an anti-tank weapon, real light armor though, 35 at the top, 16 on the sides. I mean, that thing's just going to get blown away. And you can see down here the values for, even at the front, it's a -1 to penetrate this thing. So it's going to get hit pretty hard. It's a mage, right? This thing's a little glass cannon. Decent gun. I mean, it's definitely not bad as far as penetration value. No special ammo for it. But weak sauce. Here, I actually let you guys see the little model for that Su-76. I thought this thing actually came out pretty good. I like that. The Russians looked good. Now, again, these models are all 3D printed prototype versions, but I do anticipate the production versions being resin versions that are similar, but probably just a little bit more durable. These being 3D printed versions are nowhere near as durable. And again, I think I showed it earlier, but KV-1. And you don't have to work too hard to get these guys painted up. You know, a little base coat, paint your tracks in gray, black, whatever. Hit the wheels with some type of dirty, whatever color you want to go with. I went with a rust dirt color, which is actually kind of hard to see in this light. But other than that, hit it with a green, dry brush it with a real light green, and you're good. Not a whole lot of work has to go into it. And my crap-tastic Tiger with a real shit desert camo paint job. Man, looking at this thing now, it's so horrible. Look at that. I went straight across it. I was like, no, this will look good. This will look good. Yeah, no, it didn't look I butchered this one. Oh, well, I can always reprime them and try to hit them with something else. But the Tiger is nice. Tiger definitely looks good, but I wanted to get them painted up quick for the video. I wasn't worried about making them permanently table ready. All right, so some final thoughts about the game real quick. Gotta say, I do like the mechanics, the core structure of the game in itself, right? I like how they do the range bands, because the range bands takes away a lot of the fiddliness when it comes to a miniatures game. And the fact that all you have to do is figure out how big your mat is, the playing area that you have, divide it by 5 and figure out where your sections are and put your little tokens out. That's all you got to do, right? After you got those set out, you don't have to worry about measuring for any of your shots anymore. You're good to go. And the only other measurements you have to worry about are your maneuver templates, which are easy. Bam, you just throw those down and you're good to go. To me, the big thing about it was that there's enough gameplay and chrominess in here to really get you set up to play a fun game without having to get into the nitty gritty. Plus, it can pretty much incorporate whatever you've already got. Especially if you've got a 3D printer, you can really add to your force at your whim. You can print out whatever tanks that you want to add to it, because you can find STL files for these tanks anywhere. The big thing I would recommend is getting, probably, if I'm anticipating they are. I know with the Kickstarter, they had different pledge levels that had different vehicles that came with it. So the key thing that you are going to need is the cards, right? So even if you can print out the tanks, you need the cards with the stats, because you need to know what their armor values is, the penetration values, hit values, all the other good stuff, point values, so you can set up your games. Because I know they had some other vehicles that aren't here in the base set. So I think the Elephant was in there, some other different AT guns, some more tanks. I think I even think the KV-2 was in it as well. I mean, I love the KV-2. Anyone who's played World of Tanks loves the freaking KV-2. See, that's my big thing. The game's adaptable, right? Real easy. You know what your hit values are going to be. They're real simple, just depending on what terrain you're in. And then it's simply adding in your movement values that came from the moving target and the moving defender. If they're not moving, doesn't matter. Real simple to keep track whether or not they have to continue moving, on whether or not it's a yellow or it's white. And then when it comes out to figuring out your sight lines, a simple token. And I even like the fact that they printed this out with a little handle, right? So you can hold it directly on top of your tank to figure out exactly how you need to move it. I mean, that's taking care of the player right there, right? At first, when I was looking at this thing, I thought this was supposed to represent the turret. I'm like, that's not the turret. That's the little handle, so I can hold it right there above my tank to figure out exactly what angle I can move my little turret out to. Gotta love that. The only thing is, it does get a little bit fiddly when it comes to figuring out your half values, right? So figuring out what it is to hit, easy. Figuring out what it is to damage, easy. But then after you see whether or not your penetration value is higher, right? Because if your penetration value isn't higher, then you're having to look, okay, is it at least over half? And then you have to roll and figure it out. But then if you hit the gun, you have to actually add those two numbers. That gets a little fiddly at first when you first try it. But once you've tried it and played it a little bit, it does start to come naturally. And I do like to have that inclusion in it, because you want those penetration values to mean something, right? Not just looking at it like, do I, beat the penetration? Because you didn't always need to beat the penetration. You get a good hit, or you ammo rack him, take out the tracks. Maybe you couldn't, nail this armored tiger, but you could mess up his tracks, or you could hit the turret ring to effectively destroy him without destroying him. Because if you can get around him where he's not aiming and you've taken out his turret ring, he's pretty well out of the game, especially if he's immobilized. So yeah, that combined with the ease of movement, simply being able to place those tokens right there in front of the tank to know. And like I said, all it is when you're turning your tank, if it's more than a 45-degree angle, it takes a movement unit. That's it, right? So a T-34 here, moving at a 90-degree angle, like so, if he did like that, that's 3 movements, right? 1, 2, and then 3 for that over 45-degree turn. That's it. So yeah, definitely recommend this one to anyone who is into tank games, especially tank skirmish games. I like the system. It does work well. If you've missed the Kickstarter, they will be having retail copies available later on. I'm not sure how much of the expansion material they're going to be, printing out for people. I know they'll have, extra copies of the base game. It probably will depend on, how well it sold and how much they were able to afford to be able to get produced on how many of the expansions that they're going to have. So if this is something that interests you, make sure you give yourself a note, keep track of it, pay attention. You know, I'll be filming the production version again when it does come out, because I want to compare the difference between the prototypes and maybe add these prototypes in and have just big war going on when I get a little more table space available. Because like I said, that's the cool part about it. You can do it with as much table space as you want. Technically speaking, you could even reduce it down if you wanted to. I mean, it's your game. Have fun with it. Go micro machines and see what happens. So yeah, PanzerKampf by Trafalgar Editions. Definitely a cool one. And they have other games besides this. And like I said, if you watched my previous video that I did on this game, remember all that stuff was just stuff that I jerry-rigged together just because I wanted to poke around at the system a little bit. This video definitely gives you a better idea on how all that's going to work out together. If you got any questions, anything else you guys want to see more about the game, by all means, feel free to put it down below in the comments and let me know. Anyway, that's going to be it for me on this one. You guys take care, and I will catch you in the next one.